America's Book Club is brought to you by these television companies and is supported by the Ford Foundation. From the nation's iconic libraries and institutions, America's Book Club takes you on a powerful journey of ideas, exploring the lives and inspiration of writers who have defined the country, in conversation with civic leader and author David Rubenstein.
As a young boy growing up in Baltimore, I went to my local library and was inspired to read as many books as I could. Hopefully people will enjoy hearing from these authors, and hopefully they'll want to read more.
Now from the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., a best-selling author who writes about finding purpose, connection, and cultivating lasting joy. His books include Love Your Enemies, Build the Life You Want with co-author Oprah Winfrey, and his latest, The Happiness Files, Arthur Brooks.
We're going to have a conversation with one of America's most dynamic intellects. He's an author, he's an academic, he's an administrator, and he's also an expert on the most important subject in the world, happiness. How do you get to be an expert on happiness, by the way? I mean, have people been trying to figure out how to be happy for thousands, millions of years? How did you become an expert on happiness, and what is the key to being happy?
Well, thank you, David, and to all of you for making this possible. What a beautiful place that we're in, and C-SPAN providing such an essential service. I get to talk about my favorite subject, which is humanity's favorite subject, which is the pursuit of human happiness. I started off my academic career as a pretty traditional behavioral scientist. I was doing work on behavioral economics, et cetera, and I found that everything that I was studying when I was in my earlier phases of my academic career were always coming back to happiness. I was studying art and beauty. I was studying philanthropy. I wrote a textbook on nonprofits and philanthropy, and I found that I was having conversation after conversation about the taproot, which is happiness. I left to do something that was a little less happy. I was the president of a think tank here in Washington, D.C., which sounds really brainy, but there's actually not that much thinking in a tank. When you're the president of a think tank, it was mostly fundraising. And I was delighted to do it, but I couldn't get it out of my head, this idea of coming back to my behavioral science roots. And so when I left that, I was 55 years old, when I was in the year 2019, I actually, to discern the path, I did what, I'm a Catholic, but a lot of people who are not Catholic have done this for 1,000 years. I walked the Camino de Santiago across northern Spain to discern what I was supposed to do with my talents at age 55. I mean, I wasn't going to go golf. I don't want to golf. I don't know how to golf. I have no hobbies. And I wasn't going to run a new company, so I didn't know what to do. So I walked day after day after day across northern Spain.
How long would that take?
Well, I only did about the last 160 kilometers of it. I could have done up to 800 kilometers, but I was doing it with my wife, Esther, and she said no. So I did as much as she would put up with.
Okay.
And we prayed, and every day I asked for discernment. I asked for sort of enlightenment. And there's an old belief among Catholics that when you enter into Santiago de Compostela, which is this ancient, medieval city in northern Spain, that you'll be granted what you seek, that you'll be in a state where truth can find you. And I entered the cathedral, and I realized that I wanted to spend the rest of my life lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love using science and ideas. And not long thereafter, the dean of the Harvard Kennedy School called me and offered me a position to do just that, and I'm privileged to be doing it at Harvard and elsewhere.
You also teach at the Harvard Business School.
Correct.
Now, at the Harvard Business School, one of the most popular courses at the Harvard Business School, as I understand it, is your course on happiness. I would have thought making money would have been the more important course there, but why are so many business school students so enamored with the subject of happiness?
By the second semester of the second year, they're taking all electives, and they're starting to figure out that maybe the world's idols don't actually hold out as much happiness as they have been led to believe. There's a myth that if you're incredibly successful in worldly terms, money, power, pleasure, fame, honor, that happiness will come for free. And that is incorrect. The truth of the matter is that if you shoot for happiness, and this is what I tell my students on the first day, you'll be successful enough. And there's one word there that makes them panic, which is enough. And so that's what we have to talk about. What does that actually mean in modern life? And so it's a popular class. I mean, there's 180 enrolled. There's, last I checked, 400 on the waiting list, and I hear there's an illegal Zoom link they think I'm not aware of.
But the other professors at the Harvard Business School who are teaching finance and things like that, do they take your subject seriously?
It's a good question. I would like to know, actually, but I think so, because I get a lot of my colleagues at HBS and at Harvard in general are reading the material, reading my columns in The Atlantic, and they talk an awful lot about this class. And really it is a business class, because the truth is that happiness is the business of life. We're not trying to accumulate as much in worldly resources. We're trying to figure out how to earn a fortune in love and happiness, and that's the startup of life itself.
All right, so you started doing these columns for The Atlantic on happiness, and then you wrote a book on happiness.
Right.
And then you got a call out of the blue from somebody who'd been reading your columns on The Atlantic and said, I really like your columns. I'd like to do a book with you on happiness. Who was that?
That was, well, she said it was Oprah Winfrey, and I didn't believe it. And she said, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I said, yeah, and this is Batman. And it turned out it was the voice. It was actually Oprah Winfrey, who had been reading my columns all the way through the coronavirus epidemic, and then read a book that I wrote called From Strength to Strength on the first day and invited me to come on. She's she's a prodigious talent in books and, understanding. I mean, she reads, and she interviewed me and was quoting verbatim from my own book to me as the author. It was an incredible experience. And we hit it off like a house on fire, like we'd grown up together practically. And she said, why don't we write a book together, which I will kind of host and introduce to America through the lens of the science that you propagate.
And so what was it like writing a book with her? Did she know how to write well?
Yeah, it was just a wonderful experience. I mean, she hosted the book insofar as that we cooked it up at her house.
What's her house like?
It's nice. It's a nice place. It's a nice place, yeah, in Montecito, California. And I got to know her. I got to know her quite well. And here's the extraordinary thing. I mean, David, you and I are blessed to know a lot of very public people. And in American life, in public life and private life are not the same. Ordinarily, it's not the same kind of person because you have to have a persona in public. She's the same person. It's extraordinary. If we're having lunch together around her table in Montecito by ourselves talking about a writing project, or if we're on tour and we're in front of on a stage in front of thousands of people in New York, she's the same person. And I finally figured out why that is. And it's actually one of the reasons that she's quite a happy person. It's because she believes that the abundant earthly rewards that she's enjoyed, she has them because they're for other people. And that the money, the power, the fame are a way to refract other people to greater happiness. She uses them to lift other people up, and that keeps her kind of normal.
Now, when Thomas Jefferson was writing the famous preamble to the Declaration of Independence, he talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
What did he actually mean in that context?
It's not clear. It's probably the case, well, to be sure, he was cribbing from the Virginia Declaration of Rights written by George Mason that talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. And probably, we don't know, but the best belief is that Benjamin Franklin was whispering in his ear saying, say happiness. This crazy idea. Benjamin Franklin was, penning his own autobiography and had some crazy ideas. And the whole idea probably was this idea that you can be a self-inventing people. Now, you're not granted happiness, but you can imagine your own blissful future and build it yourself in this new place, even if you are the unwashed masses. That's almost certainly what they meant.
Now, your book with Oprah became a #1 New York Times bestseller, and your other book on happiness was the #1 bestseller in the New York Times. Does that tell you that people really are not happy because they're reading books on happiness?
The market for happiness is pretty good, is what that tells me, and which is great, I have to say. But it is true that people find it elusive. The thing that they most want is hard to get. And so when you can actually help people, you have a method to help get people where they need to be, and you're helping people to manage their own expectations about what it is, you can do a lot.
Okay, let's talk about your background, how you became an expert on happiness at relatively latter part of your professional career. Well, you've got a long way to go, I assume.
Well, one would hope.
So where were you born?
I was born in Spokane, Washington.
And what did your parents do?
My father was a math professor. My mother was a professional artist.
Okay, and did you have siblings?
Yeah, one brother is 3.5 years older than me, and he's in professional fundraising, actually, nonprofit fundraising. He's an expert in that, and he's a consultant to companies. He's been doing that for 40 years.
All right, so when you were growing up, did your parents say, we want you to be happy, or what did they want you to be?
They wanted me to be the world's greatest French horn player. My parents had decided by the time I was a little boy that I was going to be a classical musician. I showed a lot of aptitude for it. I started violin when I was 4, piano when I was 5. I took up the French horn at 8, and I was really good at it. And so they decided that that was what it was going to be. And my mother was my accompanist. She was also a very talented amateur pianist and violinist. And I toured, and I took lessons, and I played in every orchestra and ensemble, and that was my ambition until, well, I left college at 19, as a matter of fact, to do that
dropped out of
professionally.
college?
Well, dropped out, kicked out, splitting hairs.
Well, your father is an academic.
Yes.
What did he say about dropped out, kicked out?
He didn't think much of it. Not only was my father an academic, his father was an academic. It was the family business, to be sure.
Okay, but you were going to be a French horn player, but I would assume you wanted to be it in the United States, but you wound up in Spain. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, so I went on tour at 19, and I was playing chamber music. I played for a couple of years on the road, also with a jazz guitar player named Charlie Bird. We made some records together, et cetera. And then when I was on tour, on a chamber music tour in France, when I was 24 years old, after a concert, I met a girl who didn't speak a word of English, but she was smiling at me, which wasn't all that normal in those days. And so I tried to talk to her. I got an interpreter. I asked her out on a date. We went on a couple of dates. I went home from France, where I was studying. I had learned that she was actually from Barcelona, Spain. She was not French. I told my dad I've met the girl I was going to marry. He said, terrific, let's meet her. And I said, I have problems with that. I mean, doesn't speak a word of English. She doesn't live in the United States, and she has no clue that we're going to get married yet. He says, well, good luck with that. And so I quit my job. I was living in New York at the time, playing with this chamber music ensemble. I found a job in the Barcelona City Orchestra, and I moved to Spain and started working on my Spanish. And 2 years later, I closed the deal, and we're celebrating our 34th wedding anniversary next month.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did her parents think about somebody coming from the United States, didn't speak Spanish, and wanted to pursue their daughter?
A starving artist at that. And with, by the way, David, beautiful hair I had in those days. I had a prodigious head of hair at the time. They didn't think much of it, but what are you going to do, I guess, was kind of how they thought of it. And once again, in Barcelona, they don't think much of Americans to begin with.
All right, so how many years were you performing in Barcelona?
Full-time for 3 years.
3 years.
And I've been living off and on for the last 35 in Barcelona.
All right, so you decided to come back to the United States and actually get a college degree?
Yeah. So I actually started studying by correspondence when I was in the Barcelona Orchestra, because I was figuring out that this was probably not the path of supporting my family forever. Also, I kind of wanted to do something else with my brain by my late 20s. And so I started studying by correspondence. We moved back to the States together. My wife didn't speak English yet. She took a minimum wage job. I took a job teaching the French horn and studying at night, and got my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree without telling.
Where'd you get your bachelor's degree from?
From Thomas Edison State University in Trenton, New Jersey, which is an adult learning alternative, mostly by correspondence.
And your master's degree?
Florida Atlantic University. I did that in person at night while I was teaching the French horn by day.
And then you decided to get a PhD as well?
Yeah, well, at that point, I realized I was N for a penny, N for a pound. I quit the French horn and started my PhD.
Okay, and how did you support yourself when you quit the French horn?
I was a doctoral student, and my wife at that point had learned English and was supporting our family.
Okay.
And we were not making much.
All right, and so you got your PhD at Rand.
I started at Cornell, actually, in the economic and theory program, did my core coursework, then I moved to the Rand Corporation, where I had a job doing military operations research, doing theater-level combat modeling for the Air Force during the day so I could support myself and my doctorate at the same graduate school.
And ultimately you went to Syracuse.
Then I graduated. I taught 3 years at Georgia State University, and then I transferred up to Syracuse University, which is a good public policy program.
All right, so at Maxwell School. Uh-huh. And how many years were you teaching there?
3 years at Georgia State, 7 years at Syracuse.
And if you grow up in Barcelona, the weather's pretty good, relatively speaking. Syracuse, not quite as good. What did your wife think of that?
All I can say is my wife truly loves me.
Okay. Okay, so along the way, I assume you had some children?
Yeah, we had 3 children. We had our first 2 children, and then we adopted our third while we were in Syracuse.
Okay, and what are your children doing now?
So my oldest is working for a defense contractor in Northern Virginia. He's doing large language models and software design. Happy, he's married. His wife is expecting their second child. He's 27. My middle son is living down the street in Leesburg, Virginia as well, has 2 children. at this point. He's a Marine sniper, although he's no longer active duty. He's working for a big construction company. And my baby, our baby Marina, that we adopted when we were in Syracuse, is now a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps at Quantico, Virginia.
Of 2 or your 3 children in the Marine Corps?
2 Marines. 2 Marines.
Okay, so you're at Syracuse, and then somebody comes calling and saying that in a think tank in Washington called AEI,
Right.
American Enterprise Institute,
Correct.
they're looking for somebody who can be the head of that, but you had no fundraising experience. Why would they pick you?
Well, they had a failed search for the presidency. One of the troubles with a lot of nonprofit organizations is it seems like the best possible job, but it's hard to find a chief executive. And so they had a failed search, and they were kind of out of time. I think the last words uttered by the board of directors of AEI before offering me the job was, what the hell?
All right, so how many years did you do that?
11.
And when you're doing that, you're mostly begging for money from people,
Yeah.
right? You're not writing that much academically, or you are?
I did. I wrote books, but one of the things that's very important when you're leading an institution is to trade in your own autonomous research agenda, and the institution becomes your research agenda. And so that's what I did. I mean, the American Enterprise Institute has been dedicated since 1938 to a strong economy of opportunity, enterprise, and freedom, all the way out to the margins of society to lift people out of poverty, and good foreign policy. So I wound up promoting AEI as my research agenda for the 11 years that I was there.
11 years. After 11 years, you said you had enough?
I was spent. And the other thing that's, I have been looking at leadership, teaching at business schools off and on during my career. And one of the things that I wrote about was the tenure of the most successful social enterprise leader. I wrote a textbook on social entrepreneurship for, while I was at Syracuse. And one of the things that I found was that the most successful leaders in nonprofits, they have 5 years to build their vision, and then 5 years to instantiate their vision. And if they stay longer than 10, they're usually overstaying their welcome. Unfortunately, I published that. And then when I was 10 years in at AEI, somebody sent it to me. And so I didn't know quite what to do. Now, the chairman of my board when I was at AEI was your partner, Dan Daniela. He was a visionary chairman of the board. And at Carlisle, everybody knows at Carlisle, you guys have hired and promoted and fired and rewarded hundreds and hundreds of great and not so great CEOs. So I went to Dan, one of my great friends. I said, Dan, I'm going to have to leave, but I don't know when. How do I leave? And he thought about it, and he said, well, there's 2 ways to leave as a CEO. I said, well, tell me. He says, you can leave before you're ready, or you can leave on somebody else's terms. You choose. And I thought to myself, time to turn in my resignation. And so I did.
All right, so you did that, and then you put yourself up for hire for academic institutions who said, hey, this is a great guy, and we want to hire him, and a lot of them came after you?
Yeah, I talked to about 10 universities at the time. They all had different, virtues, and Harvard is funny when they recruit because they say you should talk to all of those other competitors, and when you're done talking to them, you'll sign with us.
Okay, so you've been teaching at Harvard now for how many years?
7 years.
And you actually live in Washington to some extent?
Yeah, well, I go back and forth. When I'm teaching at Harvard, I have an apartment in Boston, but my family lives here in Northern Virginia.
Okay, so after studying happiness for a number of years, writing about it, what are the keys to being happy in life? What are the main ingredients? And can somebody who's born unhappy become happy? And can somebody who's born happy become unhappy?
So the born part is pretty important because 50% of your baseline happiness level is in point of fact genetic. And we know that from identical twins that were separated at birth and then reunited at about the age of 40 and given personality tests. And you find that between 40 and 80% of all personality characteristics are genetic, including happiness. And that might sound depressing, but if you know your genetic tendencies, then you can tailor your habits. And so the habits are really important. Now, another 25% is circumstantial. Meaning at any time that nice things happening will push you up by a quarter, bad things push you down by a quarter. The last 25% of your happiness really is all about habits, where you have direct managerial control over your happiness, which also gives you systematically better circumstances and allows you to manage your genetics. Now, the important thing is the habits themselves, and this is the crux of your question. Happiness habits, there are thousands, but they're mostly trivial. The big ones are faith or life philosophy, taking seriously sort of the way that you transcend yourself and understand the universe, your family life, your friendships, and the meaning in your work, which means that you're earning your success and serving other people. Faith, family, friends, and work. And so these are the things that I work with other people that don't have their happiness habits or their happiness hygiene in order.
Right. Suppose somebody says, I like to be a loner, I don't really have any friends, I don't
Right.
want any friends, I'm a writer, I just want to be alone writing. Can that person be happy?
Well, that person is probably an introvert, and there is almost no one that I've ever met that needs no one, because people, Homo sapiens, are fundamentally a social creature. We're built to be around other people. Now, some people are built to be around one or two people, and some people they want a lot of fresh meat, and so they want to be around 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 people. But the truth of the matter is that there's almost nobody who's normal who's a loner.
Right. Friendship is one. What's the second?
Well, is family life.
Family life. Now, suppose you never get married and you just don't have any relations, your parents are gone, and you have
Right.
no children. Can you be happy?
Yes, and this actually comes from the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is a 90-year longitudinal study from Harvard graduates, but then matched up with people who didn't go to college. And it looks at what they've done over the course of their lives and whether or not they wound up in their 80s and 90s as happy and healthy people. What they find is that the happiest people are well married or have close friendships. And so it turns out that marriage isn't key and family isn't key, but having very, very intimate relationships with other people is key. And interestingly, I work a lot with strivers, with really hard-charging, very successful people. And they always say, oh, I know a lot of people. I have a Rolodex full of friends. And I say, real friends or deal friends? And there's a big difference between the two.
Right.
Because
Well, let's suppose you're somebody who has a lot of cousins and a lot of brothers and
Right.
sisters, but you don't like any of them.
Right, yeah.
You like to be happy then?
Yeah. No, absolutely. But what you need is to have people who truly are close to you. And so people who are family-like in your friend group, to be sure. And the apex of both family and friendship is a good marriage. Because your spouse is somebody you adopt as kin, and the happiest marriages after 5 years are also best friends.
How many of your friends have happy marriages?
Of my friends, I have no friends. I'm kidding. So most, a lot. And part of the reason is because I'm a practicing Catholic. And so Catholics, they have a tendency to not get divorced and put a lot of juice into the marriage
Right, so
itself.
what's the key to having a happy marriage?
The key to having a happy marriage is understanding actually how marriage works. And this is the most popular unit of the class that I teach at Harvard. They would keep me the entire semester on the unit called Falling in Love and Staying in Love, because it's baffling to average 28-year-olds in America today. How do you fall in love? How do you stay in love? And so I walk them through the neurochemical cascade of what's happening in their brains when they're falling in love, and then talk to them about what the actual goal is 5 years into their relationship, which nobody tells them. Now, that's a really important thing. And to cut to the chase, the answer is not passionate love, but what we call in my business companionate love. Companionate love, which is best friendship. I told my kids that, who are now, two of my kids are young married, and my son Carlos said, companionate love, that's not hot. And I said, well, trust me, it's got some hotness to it, but that's not exactly what you're in the business for if you want to live the rest of your life with this person.
People that go to Harvard Business School, I didn't go to Harvard Business School, but my assumption is they would say, making a lot of money makes you happy. Is there evidence that having a lot of money makes you happy?
No. I mean, what evidence is, the relationship with money and happiness is very complicated. One of the things that we do know is that relatively low levels of money eliminate sources of unhappiness very, very effectively. This is one of the reasons that people believe that having more and more money will make them happy, because early on in their lives, they get more money and they feel better, and they can't distinguish internally between higher happiness and lower unhappiness. When I was 19, 20, 21, I had no health care. I couldn't go to the dentist. When I was 25, I took the job in the symphony in Barcelona. I went to the dentist for the first time in 6 years. He fixed 12 cavities, and I felt a lot better. And I concluded that money bought happiness, but that was quite incorrect. Now, what we find is that what really matters, number one, is it doesn't make you unhappy. It depends how you use it, number one, and why you earned it. So those are the two big factors in money and happiness. Evolutionarily, we are told, Mother Nature tells us that if we buy more stuff, we'll be happier. That's incorrect. But there are 4 ways that money can bring you greater happiness. One is to buy experiences and spend them with people you love. One is to buy time and spend it in edifying things, which you've done abundantly, to give money away to causes you really care about. Once again, A+, David. And last but not least is saving your money so that you can see a brilliant future in intergenerational wealth. The problem is Mother Nature says do door number 1, not door numbers 2 through 5 is the problem. Now the second issue is why you earn the money in the first place. If you're earning money because there's something special that you want to do with others, that's very, very positive. If you're trying to put numbers on the board so that you can feel a certain way, that's a big problem.
So who are the happiest people you know? The wealthy people, the medium wealthy people, the least wealthy people, religious people, not religious people? Who are the happiest?
The happiest people that you can find are people, number one, who are very, very good at self-transcendence, which is a slightly parallel point. We are stuck in a psychodrama. Mother Nature doesn't care if we're happy. Mother Nature only has two goals for us, which is to survive and pass on our genes. We want to be happy, and we make this cross circuit in our minds where we say, well, these are my impulses, and I want to be happy, so following my impulses will make me happy. Quite wrong. So we are stuck in a psychodrama where we're the star. My job, my car, my money, my television shows, me, me, me. I was even the star of all my dreams last night. It's exhausting. So what we really want, what we really need is to transcend ourselves, notwithstanding our urges. Religion does that. Charitable activity does that. Close friendship actually does that. And these are the happiest people.
Now, there are surveys of happy countries from time to time,
Right.
and I think very often Denmark is number one, Finland number two, things
Right.
like that. Why are they so much happier there than we are?
So those surveys don't hold water to begin with. And part of the reason is because you can't sum across people's happiness and find out how happy a country is. The second reason is that the way that they survey this is by going to 1,000 people in each country and saying, how much do you like your life? As if we wouldn't answer the questions in different ways in different languages with different cultures. So I don't put any stock in that. It's interesting because, you know, my grandparents were Danish immigrants. They left for a reason. It was probably a pretty happy country then. They left because they were orphans with a first grade education of the wrong religion, and they started a farm in South Dakota and made a life. They were prototypical Americans. Americans are different, and that's how we've self-sorted into a different set of priorities.
Who are happier, men or women?
That's a good question, and that's changing over time. Traditionally, women. And you know, I've looked at that across all different ways over time. You know, you look at single women were traditionally happier than single men. Married women were happier than married men. Widowed women were way happier than widowed men.
If their husband was rich.
Well, I know. Well, I told my wife that, and she said, "Huh," and the only group of women that were traditionally less happy than married men were divorced women. And part of the reason is because it had the intervening characteristic of taking care of children. But this is changing, David. So you find that over the past 3 decades that women and men have been converging down to the lower level of happiness of men. And now we find single women, particularly in their 30s, are the unhappiest group in American society.
Who's the happiest group in American society?
Married religious women.
Okay, suppose you're not religious, can you be very happy?
Yes, absolutely. And that's really a question of getting to the transcendence that we talked about before, taking your philosophical life and your charitable life very, very seriously. Then you get more or less the same happiness benefits. I'm not going to say what the metaphysics are, but certainly the happiness benefits.
Were you a happy child?
It's a good question. More or less, I have to say, but probably not more than average and perhaps a little less.
And where would you put yourself on the happiness scale now?
So I have studied that extensively because I make my students take a battery of happiness tests that are they have a lot of construct validity. They're very, very well validated. And so I take the tests every 6 months myself. And when I started teaching happiness, I was at about the 10th percentile in happiness across the adult population, which is pretty bad. That means, for those who are keeping track, if you remember the SATs, 90% of the population was happier than me. Well, that's just not good enough. By the way, I know everybody in America who teaches happiness. It's always the same. They study it for a reason. It's not research, it's me-search. And so I started working and formulating these ideas and actually eating my own cooking, you know, looking at my own research, and my own happiness has risen by 60% over the past 6.5 years.
You're going to get it higher now?
It's going up. All I can say is I like the trajectory. I like the angle.
Okay, so talk about your typical day.
Yeah.
You get up, you sleep late?
No, I never sleep late. I never get up I get up before dawn every day.
What's the advantage of getting up before dawn?
So there's an ancient Sanskrit theory, Vedic theory, which the words in Sanskrit are the Brahma Muhurta, which means the creator's time. And there was this theory said that 2 muhurtas, which is 2 48-minute periods, an hour and 36 minutes before dawn, that has magical properties. It turns out that neuroscience has largely validated the idea that if you get up before dawn and witness the dawn, it has very, very strong neurophysiological properties. It enhances focus, life satisfaction, memory, and creativity. And so if you're getting up after dawn, you're already behind.
All right, so what do you do after you get up early? You go back to sleep ever, or you stay up?
No. I get up at 4:30. At 4:45, I have a gym in my house, and I work out very hard every day for 60 minutes because it's well validated in the neuroscience literature that strong exercise is the single best way to manage negative affect. So my problem with well-being is not low happiness. It's actually higher unhappiness. These are opposite, largely governed by opposite hemispheres of the brain. And I have to manage my negative affect and do so very early in the morning. And so I exercise very hard every day.
What about thinking about exercising? Would that help any?
Well, it turns out, yeah.
Because I do that every day. I'm always thinking about it.
It's like, I really should do that. It turns out that, it sort of depends if you get satisfaction from guilt per se, David.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after you exercise, what do you do the rest of the day typically?
Then I'm usually finishing up at about 5:45. I get cleaned up, I get in the car, my wife and I, we go to Catholic Mass. We attend Mass every day when I'm home. And when I'm on the road, usually I'm staying in a place where, the nice thing about being a Catholic, it's like Starbucks. It's the franchise system. And so the service is the same in almost every place and it's available. So I start which, by the way, you can also get through meditation practices, but it's one of the best ways that I know because it's also well validated that this is the best way to start to gather the dopamine in the prefrontal cortex of the brain for greater creativity and life satisfaction.
Some of my friends tell me they meditate a couple of times a day. Do
Right.
you think meditation makes you happier?
Yes, it absolutely does. It's well validated. And doing it first thing in the morning after exercise, before taking any nutrition, and especially before taking any caffeine is important.
What about eating? Does eating make you happier?
Yeah, well, it sort of does, and it depends on what you eat and when you eat. So when I come back from Mass, the first thing that I do is I drink coffee. We call that self-administration of a psychostimulant because that's just how we talk. That's how we get tenure in my business. And so I drink the coffee. I've been drinking very dark roast Starbucks coffee since I was a child, having born in Spokane, but growing up in Seattle. This was this was the culture. And then I eat a very high bolus of protein, a very high protein meal, which is good if it has a lot of tryptophan, because that once again is good for bringing dopamine into the prefrontal cortex and giving creativity. Look, I need 4 hours of pure creativity to be a writer, and everything is setting me up for 4 hours of uninterrupted focus.
Okay. When do you go to sleep?
I go to sleep about 9 o'clock. Now I'm married to a Spaniard. That's tricky. Spaniards like to start eating around midnight or something insane, and so that's been a lot of retraining. But it's also, I've done a lot of research into chronotypes, and a lot of people who think they're night owls actually are not. For years and years as a French horn player, I thought I was a night owl and never saw the sunrise, and it turns out I was just a musician who drank too much. And now I'm a morning lark because I'm able to change the chronotype, and my wife largely has changed with me.
Do you do the French horn anymore?
I don't. I haven't played the French horn in 25 years.
Are musicians happy?
Musicians, it depends. So chamber musicians are at the very top of the happiness hierarchy among musicians, and orchestral musicians are at the very bottom. And I've done both for a living, and I know why. It has to do with autonomy and control over one's schedule.
People who read books on happiness, are they happy?
People who are reading books on happiness, generally speaking, it's a self-selection bias. They're reading the books for a reason, which probably means they need happiness more than others. My wife would never read a book on happiness, not even mine, I guess. And the reason for it is that she's in the top decile for happiness naturally.
So today you've mastered happiness,
right,
and that's an area of your expertise. Are you thinking about mastering another area? Or you're going to stick with happiness for a while?
Well, happiness never ends. So I write a weekly column in the Atlantic called How to Build a Life. That's about the different aspects of the science of happiness. And I'm 265 columns in, and the topics are unbelievably easy to find. I mean, I get questions from people. I get hundreds of people who are contacting me about different facets of their life. And I could go in terms of the quality of life and how to build a really good life. I could do it for the rest of my life. And that was my Camino de Santiago resolution, was to lift people up and bring them together in bonds of happiness and love.
So your new book is a book on happiness.
Right.
It's your columns. And is that a New York Times bestseller yet?
Yeah, so far, yeah. We're very, very lucky that the readers have put it on the New York Times bestseller list.
And you think social media is making people happier or not happier?
Much unhappier, dreadfully unhappier. It's one of the three great hurricanes, downward forces and unhappiness that have actually hurt young adults in my lifetime. The others being political polarization and the isolation that came from the coronavirus epidemic.
As people age, do they get happier or less happy?
So that's a good question. And my students don't know. On the first day of class, I ask them to think. I said their average age 28, my MBA students. I say, imagine yourself in 10 years, you're 38. And they say, oh, that's really old. And I say, just wait. And I say, happy or unhappier? And they all choose happier. Well, 5% say unhappier, but that's like the French students. They're in the back smoking cigarettes or something. But happier, and I say, why? And they think all these good things are going to happen, and they are. And then I say, okay, 48 happier or unhappier? And they say a little happier because more of the same. Then I say 78. And I say, I don't want that. And I say, why not? And they can't tell me. When you're 28, it just doesn't sound like fun to be 78. So I say, okay, young friends, you're saying that your happiness is going to rise and rise and rise and rise and max out and then start back down again. And then I show them the data on millions of people around the world. And it's all the same no matter where you go. Sub-Saharan Africa, the Indian subcontinent, North America, every place. Right. And what happens is, and traditionally this has been the case for many years, that people actually decline in their self-evaluation of happiness day to day from their early 20s until the early 50s. And the reason is not because they're actually unhappier. It means they're enjoying their lives less because life is really stressful during that period. But they're banking a lot of meaning in their lives. That comes in their early 50s until about 70. Almost everybody gets happier from their early 50s until 70. And then the population breaks up into two groups. Half of the population keeps getting happier after 70, and the other half of the population starts back down. So I want to help them make the decisions in their 20s and 30s and 50s and 60s that will get them on the upper branch when they're old.
Okay, let's suppose I'm an average person. I read your book. I want to be happy, but I don't know if I digested your book completely. Let's suppose I came to see you. What would you recommend that an average person, average unhappy, average happy person, what should I do? 3 or 4 things I could do to make myself happier.
Well, to begin with, I would take an inventory to find out where your greatest challenge is. Number one, I'd give you a test to find out whether happiness is your problem, if you have a problem, or unhappiness is your problem. And this is called the affect test that I give to a lot of the people that I'm working with, a lot of the executives and to all of my students, for example. Half of the population is above average in negative affect intensity, which is to say that they have intense negative moods. Now, moods are a limbic phenomenon. They're a physiological phenomenon. Moods and emotions, they exist to give you alerts about the outside world. You need positive and negative emotions, but half of the population is above average in the intensity of the negative emotions. Most of them think they need to be happier. They actually need to be less unhappy. And so that will give me strategy with respect to what's going on with you. The second thing that I'm going to do is to find out where your greatest challenge is. Now, the definition of happiness is it's not a feeling. That's a mistake that people make. The definition of, and feelings, by the way, are evidence of happiness, like the smell of the turkey is evidence of your Thanksgiving dinner. Real happiness has the macronutrients. The Thanksgiving dinner is protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Happiness has the 3 macronutrients of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And I would start digging in with you to find out where your greatest challenge is. I know a lot of very successful people that have enormous amounts of satisfaction, which is the joy you get from accomplishments after delayed gratification. They're pretty good with meaning. They have a good sense of the meaning of their lives, but they've never really come around to enjoying their lives. And so I'll have to work on a strategy for that. Others are really good at enjoyment, but they're not so good at meaning. So I'm going to find out where the weaknesses actually lie, and I'm going to put together a strategy that actually exploits that.
Right. So everyone can't get a hold of you and come to see you.
Yep.
So many people would go see a psychiatrist, I presume, if they want to be happier.
Right.
Does psychiatry make you happier if you go for a long time? And not.
Well, psychoanalysis is something that you go to for a long time, typically, or other forms of therapy. Psychiatry is largely, as a medical profession, is one in which there's a lot of drugs that are dispensed. And what they have in common, psychotherapy and psychiatry have in common, is that they're normally used to address pathology. They're normally used to address people who are really in a whole lot of trouble with mood disorders, for example, that need to treat these things because they're so dysregulated in their emotional life and their unhappiness is so out of control. Most people don't actually need that, but they all can benefit from understanding the science of happiness. Now, one of the things that people who are not dysregulated typically do is they turn to self-improvement. And self-improvement provides a lot of epiphanies, but it never sticks. And the reason is because it doesn't take a scientific approach. The right approach to look at happiness interventions, what we're talking about here, and making them stick is, number one, understanding the science. Number two, changing your habits. And number three, teaching these things to other people. So it's like learning math. It's the same basic approach. So I specialize in people who don't need in-house or residential psychiatric care, for example. I want to talk to people in all different walks of life, have normal problems, but they want to be happier and a little less unhappy.
Right. Throughout the civilization, people have drunk alcohol
Right.
as a way of making themselves happier. Is
Actually
alcohol going to make you
themselves
happier?
less unhappy.
Less unhappy.
That's
so
why they do that,
would
right.
you recommend the drinking of alcohol to be a little happier or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, no, but I say that with a certain amount of caution. Because the truth of the matter is that mild alcohol consumption is largely innocuous. The problem is that mild alcohol consumption has been largely distorted over the past couple of decades. All of that old research that says that 2 glasses of wine, no problem. The right maximum is about 2 glasses a week of alcohol, hard alcohol or beer or wine. And I know that's a very discouraging thing, but part of the reason for that is because it's really neurotoxic. Anything that's a euphoric substance is neurotoxic. Now, people tend to use euphoric substances to moderate their high level of negative affect. That's just like workaholism or inappropriate internet use. I like to turn them to strategies that work much better.
So today, would you say that the United States is a country where more people are happy than unhappy, or more people are unhappy than happy?
We are a mixed country, to be sure, and there's a whole lot that we could do. Now, there's a whole lot that we could do personally. There's a whole lot that we could do with respect to just some of these physical properties that we're talking about. Eating in a more healthy way and exercising more would be a good thing to do for most people's well-being, to moderate their negative affect and to live longer with better high quality of life. But it's also the case that there are trends in American life that are cultural trends that are pushing down our happiness systematically. The problem is, David, we're getting less happy.
Well, let me ask you the question that maybe is obvious, the answer to some people, but does sex make people happier?
Yeah, it does a lot. It does a lot, especially men, is what we find. And that's one of the things that we found, for generation after generation after generation. Now, let's get a little bit, drill down into that a little bit more in a way that's not, compromising the conversation. Men and women who are in a loving, exclusive relationship, these are the people who actually benefit the most from sex, which is the reason that monogamous religious couples, they tend to get the greatest life satisfaction from having an active sex life.
Okay, and what about the idea of changing your outlook? Let's suppose you're born unhappy, you have an unhappy marriage, you have an unhappy relation with your children. Can you really change your life at the age of 40 or 50 and really become happy, even though you've been unhappy for most of your life? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, for sure. But one of the reasons that people they tend to chalk up to their circumstances their unhappiness, and it really isn't. It's mostly this genetic property that their mother probably did make them unhappy biologically, is the reason, what it comes down to. But understanding that and then having the best possible happiness habits can benefit them tremendously.
So we wanted to talk about your books. How do you actually write the books? You get up at 4 in the morning and start writing for an hour or two?
No, I never write until I've actually gotten back from Mass, that I've had my coffee and this big 60 grams of protein, and then I'm really ready to go because my brain is primed. I want as much dopamine in my prefrontal cortex as possible without using pharmaceuticals. So I don't want to use any of these psychostimulants that actually do that, and that's the best way to do it, to get 4 hours of.
So how many hours can you write before you say, I've had enough for today?
So it depends on the quality of the writing, to be sure. I can usually get 4 hours of real productivity, the first 2 hours of which are very clear and the best ideas. And so when I'm stuck, which happens all the time as a writer, I leave the ideas that I'm stuck on for the first 2 hours of the next day, and I come down to that. Now, it also means that I have to guard my time. When I'm home, which is about half the time, I'm on tour speaking about half the time. When I'm home, nothing gets in my calendar in the morning before lunch. There's no Zoom meetings, there's no phone calls, there's no social media, none of it. It's all exclusively dedicated to my creative life.
And do you write longhand or on computer?
I write on the computer. And again, it's tricky, to be sure, but I've actually sort of grown up as a writer. I was still a French horn player when people were writing longhand.
And when you write, the next day do you unwrite it, you rewrite it and so forth? Does that happen a lot?
It depends. When I'm writing a column, I almost never decompose, as it were. It's all, and part of the reason is because it's a different process. Writing books, on the other hand, a book takes about 4 whole books to become a book. And so you go back and forward until it actually appears.
So do you get happiness from reading other people's books?
I read a lot, but the problem is that for my job as a social scientist, I'm reading professionally, so I'm harvesting other people's writing for information. And I'm reading about 15 to 20 academic journal articles a week in neuroscience and behavioral science. So I'm not, I always have a book going for example, and something that I really enjoy, I have to say.
Something you really enjoy. Who are the authors that you really enjoy reading?
I really love many of the spiritual authors. I read a lot of philosophy that I find extremely interesting and enjoyable because that's not my background. And I find that it glues together a lot of what's actually going through my head, I have to say. And then I'm always reading somebody else's really good nonfiction. I have a number of authors that I think are just beautiful writers.
So you've met a lot of prominent people in your life, obviously. Are there certain people you admire because they're great leaders, political leaders, government leaders, business leaders, or you haven't met anybody like that yet?
No, I've met a lot of people I admire a lot. I've been working very closely for the past 13 years with the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama, I mean, it's a great religious leader. It turns out that he's an incredibly inspirational human being as well, who every time you see him, I mean, he's the most respected religious figure in the world. And I see him every year, once or twice every year. I go to his home in Dharamsala in the Himalayan foothills.
Is it easy to get there?
What's that?
Is it easy to get to his house?
Well, yeah, I mean, it takes some doing. It takes a couple of flights, to be sure, and some of the flights are scary. But once you get there and you drive up the mountain, and once you get there, and every time I see him, it's as if he's seeing an old friend, and he's just blissful to see an old friend, and just that, with the sincerity that brings. And then, of course, the conversations that we have are really life-changing. And so that's been a relationship that's modeled a lot of what I'm trying to do. And then there are other public figures. Oprah Winfrey, I talked about her before. George W. Bush, a mutual friend of ours. What a wonderful man he is. I mean, I just love him.
And you ever met any private equity people you really like?
Yeah, it's like, there's...
Not yet.
Yeah, it's Rubenstein, Daniello, and Conway are just the absolute best.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you look back on your life, you've had an incredible life. You must be pretty happy. Did your parents live to see your success?
My parents died pretty early, I have to say, and it was not the best. I mean, my father died when he was 66, so 5 years older than I am right now. He got sick in his early 60s. He retired early, and it didn't work out well for him. My mother suffered a great deal from a lot of mental illness, and the result of it was by the time she was my age, she was quite demented. She had suffering from dementia, and so the result of it was by their 60s, there wasn't a lot of good going on in their own lives. I had a good relationship with my parents, but they suffered a lot.
So as you look back on what you've achieved in your life, what makes you the happiest of what you've achieved so far? Is it your children, your marriage, your professional accomplishments, this interview? What would you say it is?
This interview is the absolute apex of, and by the way, David, I'm really grateful to you for this. This is the third time we've done a conversation like this. It just gets better and better.
I'm learning, I'm getting happier every time I talk.
Well, it's the most amazing thing. It's like, the most amazing thing is that you're three questions ahead of me and you've not looked at a single note, which is really an extraordinary achievement. So the things that have made me happy really have nothing to do with achievements, and they have everything to do with love. The loves that I have in my life, the love that I have, the relationship that I have with the Creator, my family life, which has turned out to be so unbelievably satisfying. The fact that I live with one of my children and his spouse and their children, and the others are just up the street, and we've made a resolution to have a close family, not in a compound, but to be together. And I'm very close to my grandchildren at this point. I have 3. I'll have 4 by next month. I have a few very, very close friends that I really, and some in private equity too, by the way. And these are the most wonderful people that I've ever met. And that's what I value, is the love in life. And the truth is that when I look at the research, the Harvard Study of Adult Development, that 90-year study, the guy who ran it for 30 years, a psychiatrist at the Harvard Medical School named George Valiant, he was asked to sum it up and look at the trajectory of people's lives. He said, just sum it up in a few words. And he said, happiness is love, full stop. Is what it came down to. And my own work validates that, and my own life validates that as well. I've
never met the Dalai Lama, so just tell me, is he a happy person generally?
He's the happiest person I've ever met. I think he's the happiest person.
And when you go have lunch or dinner or whatever, does he have small talk, or there's no small talk? It's just about religious things or spiritual things, or?
Well, it is small talk, but it's small talk about big things is the way that this works. So for example, everything is a lesson. At one point, he's always had a cat. The Dalai Lama has a cat. The Dalai Lama loves his cat, talks about his cat, uses him as a metaphor for the cat wants to be warm and the cat wants to be cuddled and all that. And at one point I was having lunch with the Dalai Lama and I said, by the way, Your Holiness, what's your cat's name? And he said to me, no name, cat. And what he was telling me is that you wouldn't become so attached to the cat to name the cat. The whole problem is the whole the whole priority of this is to love the cat, notwithstanding your attachment to the animal. And then he gave me a little lesson on that. And so that's the kind of small talk that we have.
So you obviously believe as a Catholic in, I guess, an afterlife in heaven, I assume.
Yeah, for sure.
So you expect you'll get into heaven?
Well, I'm doing my best. That's all I can say. I'm still a Catholic, meaning, yeah, I'm not so sure, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
But when you go to confession, you don't have anything to confess because you've led a great life, right?
Oh my goodness, there's always something to confess.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's always something to confess. Oh,
okay,
yeah.
So today, if you were to ask
Yeah.
your wife about your happiness expertise, would
Right.
she say he's really not as expert on happiness as he should be, or I shouldn't have married him, or whatever? What would your wife say about all this?
So sometimes my wife says, when I'm doing something that's clearly contrary to what the research would suggest, do you read your books? She'll ask me, and part of the reason is her nice, very, the Spaniards, their humor is kind of on the nose, and she's telling me that it's time for me to pay attention to what I'm actually doing. And the trouble with it is that I'm very, very driven. And I'm driven to do more and driven to do more. And I know you can relate to this, David. More. I want more life. I want more experiences. I want to see more things. I want to do more things. And she's quite correct that that is not the secret of the happiest life. That isn't. Life has a cadence to it. And life requires that you slow down, that you experience things. And this is one of the things that we experienced when we were on the Camino, when we were walking the Camino de Santiago, where it's just walking all day long. Hundreds of miles you're walking. And we would stop and we would look at a little flower open up. And I never see that in my ordinary life because I'm trying to do something that's too audacious for that. And so the result of it is that I have to put my life into the hands of my beloved. And she will take me to look at the flower open at eventide.
So would it surprise you that there may be some people watching who would say, I don't really like people that talk about happiness because I'm not happy, and
Right.
he's so happy, it makes me feel unhappy that somebody could be so happy.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And so I assure them that it's a real struggle for me. And one of the things that's actually important in my research is to be quite authentic about the fact that it has been a struggle for me. And I'm actually naturally less happy than most people who are reading my research. That's why I do the research. That's why I'm a selfish man. I want to dedicate this to other people, but I want to find the secret for myself as well.
Now, on his epitaph,
Right.
Thomas Jefferson famously listed 3 things, including being the founder of the University of Virginia, author of Declaration of Independence, and so forth. On your tombstone, eventually, maybe 50 years from now, what would you want to have written there?
Yeah.
The Master of Happiness, or I died happy, or what would you like?
He lifted people up and brought them together in bonds of happiness and love to do the will of the Lord.
And do you ever let your children be interviewed about your happiness?
I don't even let my kids Google me, for Pete's sake. I mean, it's like, there be dragons, David.
Right, so do you ever lose your temper? You're a happy person.
Yeah.
Do you ever lose your temper and start cursing, and maybe not around the Dalai Lama, but around somebody? You ever get mad at something and just say, I can't stand this?
Well, I lose my patience, to be sure, but I have to say that one of the greatest things about being associated with the movement on happiness and having people buy my books and recognize me wherever I am in public, occasionally when I'm in public, is that being a jerk is really off-brand. And it's held me to a higher behavioral standard. It's an incredible thing that ever since that people started buying my books, I say, you know, I'm pretty irritated at the airport right now, but I'm not going to show that because probably somebody saw me on TV talking to David Rubenstein, and they would be really disillusioned by that. And then I act a little bit better, and I get happier.
You get happy when people come with you for selfies or autographs, or you don't like that?
That's the greatest thing ever. Are you kidding? I feel so lucky that I could actually be associated with happiness in this world. I feel so grateful for that every day.
Well, it's an incredible story, and you know, I'm glad to meet somebody as happy as you are. I'm going to try to read your books more so I get more happiness myself. But the latest book you have is what?
The Happiness
Title?
Files is 33 of the most popular columns I've published in The Atlantic over the past 5 years, specifically about work and home life.
And each column takes how long to write?
Each column takes me about 12 hours to write.
And when you write books on happiness or columns, you turn them in. Does anybody bother to edit you, or they say, "Look, he's an expert on happiness, no point in editing"?
Oh, they edit the daylights out of me. I have a wonderful, my Penguin Random House portfolio is my publisher for my books, and I have a wonderful publisher, Bria Sanford, who's been publishing my books for a good long time now, and she knows perfectly that nothing's going to come in in polished form. It's going to take about 5 versions.
Now, when I see people sometimes who are smiling a lot, does that mean they're happy or they're not happy?
It can mean either, is the whole thing. And part of it is that the way that your affect, the way that you present, it can really depend an awful lot about your facial musculature. However, David, I will give you this piece of advice. There are 19 types of smiles.
19.
19. They were documented in the latter part of the 19th century by a physiologist by the name of Duchenne, a French physiologist who he had a hypothesis there was only one kind of smile that was associated with true, authentic human happiness. And so he went around the world, Papua New Guinea and Japan, Sub-Saharan Africa, and it turns out he's right, that the true happiness smile uses the same muscles in every population in the world. And so he named it after himself, the Duchenne smile, which is the best thing about academia.
What does it look
absolute
like?
Best thing. And here's how it looks. It's not your mouth, it's the eyes. The eyes tell all. And so you can be smiling like this, but I can be like this. And you know, that's like the United Airlines smile. You know, it's like, thank you for flying United, get off my plane. But if you want to know if somebody's actually happy with you, they're actually exercising two sets of muscles, the zygomatic major muscles and the orbicularis oculi muscles, in the top of the cheeks and around the eyes, and you cannot actually simulate that. If you scrunch up those muscles, if you're 85 years old and you have pronounced crow's feet, it means you've been doing the Duchenne smile and you've experienced a lot of joy. That should be our goal, as big crow's feet.
Arthur, I am happier for having interviewed you. Thank you very much. I'm going to feel a lot happier tonight and tomorrow. Thanks for what you've done for the happiness of the world.
Thank you, David. Thank you. You make me happy too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Arthur Brooks and David Rubenstein viewed artifacts from the Library of Congress's archive.
All right, well, we'll start down here. And we're going in chronological order from the manuscript division. And the first item is future President James A. Garfield's diary from 1853. And this was a period where he was courting his future wife, Lucretia, but trying to determine whether their different temperaments and personalities would make him happy. And he actually says that whether she has the warmth of nature that I need to make me happy, because they came from very different families in terms of showing affection, and he was very outgoing and she was very reserved. And ultimately he decided to go ahead and marry her, but they had a very rocky courtship and a rocky marriage because of that different temperament.
They had an unhappy marriage.
For a while. It actually has a happy ending because a few crises in their relationship meant that he started to appreciate her calm nature and her ability to forgive. And basically after about 10 years and 5 kids, thereabouts, he fell madly in love with his wife. And then you're able to track their relationship through his diaries and their letters. And at one point he says, "We love not because we ought to, but because we do."
Oh, wonderful. And they spent the rest of their lives together.
Rest of their lives together until his untimely demise. He was assassinated in 1881. But they absolutely they adored one another. But it was an interesting thing of him trying to determine what makes them happy. And she wrote a letter to her children afterwards that when you read our letters, I want you to understand the differences between myself and your father, so you understand what you're reading. And they didn't sanitize their letters before giving them to the Library of Congress.
Darn.
So it's a wonderful story.
See more with Arthur Brooks and the Library of Congress's archive on America's Book Club, The Treasures, available at cspan.org/abc and C-SPAN's YouTube page.